My twin younger sister and I were the kind of siblings who never openly acknowledged each other. At school, I never allowed her to call me Big Brother, so no one knew that I had a younger twin sister who was not only the school's #1 student but also its most beautiful girl. That all changed on the day I awakened my memories. Because I forgot to bring my meal card, I instinctively called out to my sister, Su Nyanchu, and told her to come swipe her card for me. The moment everyone heard the name Su Nyanchu, quite a few students around us turned to look. First, they were shocked that someone actually dared to call Su Nyanchu in the cafeteria. Second, they were even more stunned that someone was asking Su Nyanchu to pay for his meal. How could something like that possibly happen? Yet under everyone's watchful eyes, Su Nyanchu, wearing her usual cold and expressionless face, actually walked over, took out her meal card, and paid for my food. The school's forum exploded instantly. Shocking! The aloof campus beauty Su Nyanchu generously pays the bill for a mysterious boy? As soon as the post was uploaded, the comment section was flooded. I'm at the Western food section on the second floor of cafeteria #1. I swear on my life, someone called the academic goddess once, and she really walked over obediently and swiped her card. Another comment read, +1. I always thought Su Nyanchu was allergic to people because she never talks to anyone. Sometimes she doesn't even bother responding to the teachers. While the entire school forum was in chaos, I was still wondering where I had lost my meal card. Seeing the worried look on my face, Su Nyanchu hesitated for a long time before finally speaking in a soft voice. School bag? I shook my head and replied, no. I already checked it when I packed my books. Only then did I suddenly realize that this iceberg of a girl had actually spoken. Even though she had only said a single word, I couldn't resist teasing her. Oh, so you finally decided to speak. The lips she had just parted immediately pressed into a straight line. She froze in place, then silently slapped her meal card onto the table, picked up her salad, and walked away without saying another word. Yang Ren, who was sitting beside me, leaned over and asked, Huichuan, since when have you been so close to Su Nyanchu? I lazily replied, we've always known each other. Hearing my answer, Jiang Ren failed to hold his fork properly and it scraped harshly across the plate. He lowered his voice and said, so that's how it is. I nodded and reminded him, yeah, remember to pay her back. Jiang Ren looked confused. Huh, I raised an eyebrow. This was Su Nyanchu's money. Remember to return it. Normally, since the original owner of this body had a good relationship with Jiang Ren, treating him to a meal wouldn't have been a big deal. But I had only transmigrated into this world yesterday, so at most I'd only known him for half a day. Besides, I didn't even like eating in the school cafeteria. There was no way I was going to become his permanent meal ticket. Jiang Ren was even more shocked this time and could only lower his head and quietly answer, oh. Before I knew it, school was over. I packed my bag as quickly as possible, rushed out of the classroom, and the moment I walked through the school gate, I immediately spotted the luxury car with the license plate ending in 11,111 among the rows of expensive cars. As soon as I got inside and sat down, the female driver started the engine. I quickly stopped her and pointed toward the school gate. Su Nyanchu isn't out yet, let's wait for her. The driver immediately explained, young miss has club activities after school today. Another car has already come to pick her up. Club activities? I nodded knowingly while scrolling through short videos. Then let's go. Instead of rushing home to relax after school, she actually chose to participate in club activities. That was exactly the kind of thing a top student would do. As someone suffering from terminal laziness, I truly couldn't understand it. At the dinner table, Mom asked Su Nyanchu with concern, Nyanchu, how have things been at school recently? Su Nyanchu quietly put down her chopsticks, gently nodded, and didn't say a single word. Mom smiled with satisfaction and said, have you already finished the music scores I brought you last time? In a few days, I'll take you to visit Elder Feng. Su Nyanchu nodded again without showing much of a reaction. I hurriedly swallowed the food in my mouth, quickly raised my hand, and interrupted. I want to go too. Mom immediately shot me a glare. What are you going for? With a completely serious face, I began making things up. We're fraternal twins. We can't stay too far apart, or our magnetic fields will become unstable. My sister and I had grown up without a father's love, yet we became complete opposites. I was full of thorns and argued with Mom every single day, while my younger sister kept everything bottled up inside her heart. It wasn't until she met the male lead that she thought she had finally found someone she could rely on. Unfortunately, she wasn't the heroine of this story. In the end, because the man she loved never returned her feelings, she took her own life. According to the novel, Su Nyanchu first met the male lead, Pei Chuan, at Elder Feng's house. With my temper, there was no way I could accept such a miserable ending for my own little sister. Mom looked at me as if she wanted to say something, but stopped herself. Seeing the disbelief written all over her face, I couldn't even be bothered making up more excuses. Why do you care why I want to go? Anyway, I've already decided. Just then, Chen Rang suddenly interrupted. Nyanchu is going there to study. If Beichuan wants to have some fun, Uncle Chen can take you to an art exhibition instead. His voice was gentle, and the smile on his face was perfectly measured, making him seem warm and approachable without being overbearing. On the surface, his words sounded thoughtful, but in reality, he was implying that if I went along, I would only cause trouble. Sure enough, Mom was persuaded by him and began to hesitate. But I was someone who already knew the plot. In the novel, Chen Rang relied on this kind and fatherly image to gradually win over the original owner of this body. No matter how rebellious the original owner was, he couldn't resist this long-awaited fatherly affection. It was like a mirage in the middle of a desert. Even when you know it's probably fake, you still can't stop yourself from hoping it's real. That was exactly why the original owner later kept making things difficult for the heroine, and behind all of it, Chen Rang's manipulation had definitely played a huge role. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. The original owner had ended up in prison, and this man had played a huge part in that. There was no way I was going to be polite to him. I immediately fired back without giving him any face. Mom frowned and scolded me. Beichuan, how can you talk to Uncle Chen like that? Where are your manners? I let out a cold snort and replied unhappily, I've already said what I wanted to say. Since you didn't object to me going to Elder Feng's house with Su Nyanchu, I'll take that as you agreeing. In the end, Mom actually gave in. She had always hoped that my sister and I could repair our relationship, or at the very least stop acting like enemies every time we met. Since I had finally taken the initiative to accompany my sister, she had no reason to refuse. The next morning, I got into the car with 2 huge dark circles under my eyes. Su Nyanchu was still standing outside the car, looking slightly stunned, so I impatiently called out, "Get in already." After seeing me pat the empty seat beside me, she quietly got into the car without saying a word. We entered the school one after another, but after what had happened in the cafeteria yesterday, the attention on us had reached a whole new level. Some students even secretly took out their phones to record us, while whispers buzzed around us like a swarm of mosquitoes, giving me a headache. I couldn't help but think to myself, sure, I'm handsome, but there's no way I've gained a fan club overnight. This crowd looks like they're about to hold a press conference. Su Nyanchu stared at my face for several seconds as if nothing was unusual. I casually reached over and patted her on the shoulder. The moment my hand landed, I could clearly feel her body stiffen ever so slightly. Leaning closer with a grin, I whispered into her ear, "You should be happy you get to look exactly like me." After saying that, I confidently turned around and walked into my classroom, leaving behind nothing but my cool-looking back. As for the morning classes, I slept through all of them as usual. My seat was next to the window, and as long as I stacked my books high enough, the teacher couldn't see what I was doing even if I lowered my head. At noon, I wasn't really hungry, so I bought a box of strawberries from the school store and leisurely ate them while walking down the staircase, scrolling through short videos on my phone. After only a few steps, I suddenly sensed something was off. When I looked up, I found several boys blocking the entire staircase. The one leading them, Lu Chen, stepped forward and carefully looked me up and down before asking in an unfriendly tone, "What's your name?" I answered without hesitation, "None of your damn business." One look was enough to tell me they hadn't come with good intentions, so I wasn't about to be polite. I casually popped another strawberry into my mouth. Seeing that I wasn't cooperating, one of the boys beside Lu Chen suddenly slapped the strawberry box out of my hand. It crashed onto the floor, scattering strawberries everywhere. He shouted arrogantly, "Answer the damn question instead of acting tough." I looked at the strawberries on the ground, but instead of getting angry, I smiled. My smile only irritated him even more. He pointed at me and yelled, "What the hell are you smiling at? Who told you that you could laugh?" I looked him straight in the eye and replied, "Do I need your permission to smile now?" Then I gave him a huge eye roll before crouching down and calmly picking up the strawberries one by one, placing them back into the box. Only after I finished did I raise my head and look at them again. "You guys really act like masters from the old days ordering servants around. What, bored of modern society and decided to experience feudalism instead?" The boy angrily pointed his finger at me again. "You—" I cut him off immediately. "Stop pointing your finger at me." At that point, the last bit of my patience was gone. "Seriously, are your lives too peaceful? You just had to come and pick a fight with me. Do you even know these strawberries cost 50 yuan a box? Lu Chen frowned, clearly dissatisfied with my reaction. He couldn't understand how someone this rough and rude could possibly have anything to do with Su Nianchu. He stared at me and asked coldly, "What exactly is your relationship with Su Nianchu?" The moment I heard her name, I immediately answered without the slightest hesitation. "I'm her boss." No matter how good Lu Chen's temper normally was, my attitude completely pushed him over the edge. "How dare you talk like that?" I waved my hand impatiently. "Get lost. Stop wasting my time. I'm in a hurry to get back and sleep." More and more students gathered to watch the commotion, and the staircase became completely blocked. My mood grew worse by the second. "Move, don't make me say it again." Lu Chen realized this wasn't the right place to continue arguing, so he could only leave with his group. Before walking away, he threatened me to wait for him. I rolled my eyes. "Yeah, sure, I'll be waiting." The moment I returned to my classroom, I threw the half-full box of strawberries straight into the trash. Seeing more than half of them wasted made my heart ache. No way. I'm definitely getting this money back from Su Nianchu. I stormed toward her classroom and found her quietly sitting at her desk reading a book. "Su Nianchu, come out for a second," I called out loudly enough for everyone to hear. The moment her name echoed through the classroom, every student immediately looked up in shock. Did someone really just come looking for Su Nianchu so openly? They couldn't believe what they had heard. Su Nianchu looked toward the window. After recognizing my voice, she quietly closed her book, stood up, and walked outside. Standing in the hallway, she looked at me with her dark eyes, silently asking what I wanted. "Buy me another box of strawberries." Confusion was written all over her face. I clicked my tongue impatiently. She still didn't say anything, but a trace of coldness appeared in her eyes. She thought this was another sign that I was angry and had come to take it out on her just like before. So yesterday had really been nothing more than an illusion. A faint chill flashed across her eyes and her expression instantly darkened. She lowered her head and silently waited for the storm she thought was about to come. "Did you hear me? Buy me another box of strawberries. They cost 50 yuan and I'd only eaten a few of them." When she still didn't respond, I reached out and lightly flicked her forehead. The instant I touched her, the coldness in her eyes disappeared and was replaced by complete surprise. Finally, after enduring my increasingly impatient stare, she managed to squeeze out a few words. "Your card is with you." I paused for a moment before suddenly remembering, that's right. Yesterday in the cafeteria, Su Nianchu had left her meal card with me. How could I have forgotten something so important? I scratched my head awkwardly and smiled. "Oh, my bad, I forgot." After apologizing, I lowered my voice and asked her, "Have you offended anyone recently?" Su Nianchu stared at me for a moment before answering blankly, "No." "Good, as long as that's the case." I turned to leave, but after taking 2 steps, I suddenly remembered something and looked back at her. "Do you have club activities again this afternoon?" Su Nianchu hesitated. It was obvious something inside her was struggling fiercely. After gathering all her courage, she gently shook her head. "All right, then after school I'll wait for you outside your classroom and we'll go home together." Before she could even nod, I had already turned around and walked away. "We'll go home together." Those 5 simple words echoed over and over in Su Nianchu's mind. Her thoughts went completely blank, and she stood frozen in place as if someone had pressed the pause button on her life. It wasn't until my figure completely disappeared at the end of the hallway that she finally snapped back to reality. Her heart pounded wildly against her chest, almost as if it were about to leap out of her throat. He actually wants to go home with me. It was something she hadn't even dared dream about over the past few years, yet now I had taken the initiative to suggest it myself. For a moment, she couldn't even tell whether she was dreaming or awake. When she absent-mindedly returned to the classroom, the classmates who had been secretly eavesdropping immediately pretended that nothing had happened. Su Nianchu ignored all the curious glances around her and quietly returned to her seat. A few moments later, the school forum exploded once again. This time, someone uploaded a crystal-clear photo of me standing together with Su Nianchu and added a caption that read, "Su Nianchu personally admitted that her meal card is with that guy." Considering how close they were standing, this is practically the miracle of the century. Normally, if anyone gets even a little too close to her, she'll scare them away with that icy stare of hers, let alone allow any physical contact. The post's views skyrocketed in no time. Jiang Ren stared at the photo until he almost ground his teeth to dust. Jealousy practically overflowed from his eyes. Thinking back to the casual way I had said, "We've always known each other," he suddenly felt as if his own brother had betrayed him. "You little liar. You acted so innocent all this time, yet you've secretly got close to the school's ice queen behind my back." At the same time, inside the boys' restroom of the second-year building, One of the students glared at the forum post on his phone and angrily said, "Brother Cheng, the post says that guy's name is Yi Huichuan. He's in class 3 of the second year. Let's go settle the score with him right now." "No need." The sound of running water echoed through the restroom as Lu Cheng calmly dried his hands, crumpled the paper towel, and tossed it into the trash can. The moment everyone heard those 2 words, they immediately exchanged knowing glances. One of them hesitated before saying, "But I checked. He gets picked up by a private car every day. It'll be hard to make a move." Just then, the restroom door was suddenly pushed open, instantly drawing everyone's attention. A voice calmly said, "I can help you." At exactly 4 o'clock that afternoon, the dismissal bell rang on time. I had just zipped up my school bag when Jiang Ren walked over. The moment I slung my bag onto my shoulder, I instinctively paused. "What's up?" Without waiting for an answer, Jiang Ren casually threw an arm around my neck. After secretly glancing toward the classroom door, he deliberately raised his voice. "Old Yi, what are you standing around for? Come on, let's leave school together." I wanted to refuse. After all, I had already promised Su Nyanchu we'd go home together, and bringing another person along felt a little awkward. Besides, I honestly wasn't interested in walking with Jiang Ren. But this time he didn't give me any chance to say no. He quickly explained, "My friend went home with his girlfriend today. Just walk with me as far as the junior high building. I'll take my car from the back gate." Since he'd already put it that way, refusing would have felt rude. As soon as I stepped out of the classroom, I saw Su Nyanchu quietly leaning against the wall waiting for me. "Didn't I tell you to wait outside your own classroom? Why did you come all the way here?" Su Nyanchu immediately stood up straight. I simply nodded without thinking much about it before casually introducing Jiang Ren. "This is my classmate. He's just walking with us for part of the way." Jiang Ren clearly hadn't expected to get so close to the famous Ice Queen. Normally, he was a pretty talkative guy, but now he awkwardly scratched the back of his head. "Hello, my name's Jiang Ren. Thanks for treating me to noodles the other day." Su Nyanchu remained as cold as ever. She didn't say a single word. Instead, she silently moved closer to me and quietly picked up her pace. As we walked, Jiang Ren suddenly said, "Beichuan, next Tuesday after school, let's check out that new internet cafe across the street. You promised me last time." Looking at the hopeful expression on his face, I hesitated for a moment before finally nodding. "All right." When we reached the junior high building, Jiang Ren waved goodbye and left, although his eyes couldn't resist sneaking one last glance at Su Nyanchu before walking away. Our family's car was still parked in its usual spot outside the school gate. After we got in, the female driver looked slightly surprised to see the 2 of us together. She casually asked, "Young miss, aren't you going to your club activities today?" The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted asking. She silently scolded herself for talking too much. After all, everyone knew the young miss almost never answered casual questions, so she'd only made things awkward for herself. The air conditioner had already cooled the car nicely. I took a pack of wet wipes from my bag, wiped the sweat from my face, and casually handed one to Su Nyanchu as well. "That's right. She doesn't have club activities today. Does she usually go every day? Are those clubs really that interesting?" Seeing me actually continue the conversation, the driver couldn't help feeling a little touched. The young master had actually responded to her. Su Nyanchu quietly wiped her hands with the wet wipe before softly replying with just 2 words. "Usually, yes." I couldn't help frowning. "If it's not even fun, why bother going? Wouldn't it be much better to go home and relax while playing games?" I said it as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Su Nyanchu simply looked at me without saying anything, so I couldn't resist flicking her forehead again. "Why are you staring at me? You look so silly." The driver pursed her lips to hide a smile. Young miss isn't silly at all, she thought. "She's a genius." Su Nyanchu let out a soft little hum before quietly turning her head to look out the window. Only then did I suddenly remember something. Back then, I had hated going home with her and always found her annoying, so she had deliberately stayed an extra hour at her club every day just to avoid riding home with me. But things were different now. Was she worried that I might suddenly change my mind again and make her get out of the car halfway home? I suddenly felt like something was wrong with my heart, so I knocked on the door of the study and solemnly announced to Mom, "I'm taking a day off." She put down the documents in her hands, looked up at me, and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Staring at me as if I were just pretending to be sick, I answered with a serious face, "My whole body hurts." She immediately shot back, "If your whole body hurts, doesn't that mean you're dead?" I shrugged. "Then maybe I am dead." Mom burst out laughing from anger, opened the drawer, and pulled out a clothes hanger. "I'll show you what being dead feels like. Is this the kind of nonsense I taught you to say?" The moment I saw the hanger, I started darting all over the study trying to avoid it. I'm serious. I don't feel well. I don't want to go to school. I need to rest. This is dictatorship. Mom chased after me while shouting, "Comfort is reserved for dead people, you little brat. Stop running around. Stand still. Be careful, there's a vase over there." As if I was stupid enough to stand there and let her hit me. I was running so fast that I accidentally slammed my back into something. A loud crash echoed through the room as the decorative vase on the table fell to the floor and shattered into countless colorful pieces. Along with it, my mother's heart seemed to shatter as well. Hearing the commotion, Su Nyanchu immediately pushed open the study door and walked in. Her first glance landed on me, her second on Mom, who was frozen in place, and finally on the colorful shards scattered across the floor. Chen Rang also rushed over after hearing the noise. The moment he saw the broken vase, his heart practically jumped into his throat. He covered his mouth, barely stopping himself from gasping out loud. Meanwhile, I quietly took a small step backward and cautiously called out, "Mom," hoping to awaken a bit of her maternal affection. Unfortunately, the moment our eyes met, all I saw was a terrifyingly cold glare. I immediately shivered and forced out an awkward laugh. "Hee. We can probably find a professional to repair it, right? I'll pay for it. Don't worry, Mom, I'll make sure it's restored, just like new." Mom was so heartbroken that she couldn't even speak. The only thing moving was the clothes hanger trembling tightly in her hand. Seeing the situation, Su Nyanchu silently backed out of the study, while Chen Rang wisely slipped away as well. Even I couldn't be bothered making things worse this time because I already knew there was no escaping what was about to happen. Sure enough, the study was soon filled with my earth-shattering screams. The beating continued until the middle of the night, and not only did my cries not stop, they actually became louder and louder. Judging from the noise, it looked like it would continue for quite a while. Fortunately, the Su family lived in a private estate. Otherwise, the neighbors probably would have called the police long ago. Meanwhile, Su Nyanchu quietly put on her headphones and focused on solving her competition problems. Every now and then, she'd take one earbud out to listen for a moment before calmly putting it back in and continuing her work. Apparently, Mom still hadn't finished teaching me my lesson. At least I had successfully gotten my day off from school. But I couldn't feel happy about it at all. Last night, Mom had beaten me for more than 3 hours and even made me kneel in front of the broken vase while sincerely apologizing to it. If my apology sounded even the slightest bit insincere, the clothes hanger would immediately land on my backside again. Seriously, just because of one broken vase? Did she really have to be that ruthless? Couldn't I just buy her another one? Lying face down on my bed, I angrily took out my phone and checked my bank balance. What the hell? I was supposed to be the young master of a wealthy family, yet my card only had 20,000 yuan in it. Wasn't this basically child abuse? The movement pulled at the bruises on my backside, making me suck in a sharp breath before obediently lying back down. 20,000 yuan wasn't even enough to buy a small part of that vase. At best, it could probably pay for the pile of broken shards lying on the floor. Still, I was the one who broke it, so I had to compensate for it. Otherwise, how could I ever hold my head high in front of Mom again? The real problem was, where was I supposed to get that kind of money? 2 minutes later, enduring the pain, I dragged my laptop onto the bed. My fingers skillfully typed out a string of code as I quickly hacked into a website and pinpointed several locations. That's right, I happen to know a little about hacking. Of course, I definitely wasn't the kind of person who used those skills to steal money online. Just kidding. Being a law-abiding citizen is my responsibility. Besides, I wasn't planning to make money through hacking anyway. The jobs worth hundreds of millions were extremely rare and way too troublesome. I couldn't be bothered taking them. So I needed a faster and much simpler way to make money: a casino. When night fell, the capital truly came alive. Endless streams of golden headlights flowed through the city like its lifeblood, stretching from east to west without pause. Towering skyscrapers glittered beneath dazzling white lights, while hidden beneath that brilliance lay countless shadows where darkness and prosperity coexisted. The location marked on my computer belonged to the largest underground casino in the capital. It gathered countless wealthy people, and money changed hands there at an unbelievable speed. Wearing a loose t-shirt, a mask, and a cap, I looked completely out of place among the dazzling nightlife. But that didn't matter. I could blend in by force if I had to. The place I was heading to was called Gwangaming. Entering through the front door required walking through several winding corridors before reaching the real entrance. 2 female bodyguards wearing sunglasses expressionlessly blocked my path. Although I couldn't see their eyes, the slight twitch at the corners of their mouths told me they'd already labeled me as suspicious. Guangming operated under a strict membership system. Without an invitation, no one could enter, and the invitation design changed every single day. Fortunately, with my technical skills, forging one wasn't difficult. I showed them the electronic invitation on my phone before casually taking off my mask. The two bodyguards carefully checked it for quite a while before finally lowering their arms and allowing me through. The elevator arrived and the doors slowly opened. Just as I was about to step inside, I suddenly froze. There were already 3 other people standing inside the elevator. Wait, isn't this supposed to be the first floor? I instinctively looked up at the floor indicator. It definitely said first floor. I hadn't seen it wrong. Strange. The map never mentioned there being another hidden level beneath it. The 3 people inside the elevator also stopped talking the moment they saw me. One of them frowned slightly and muttered, "Why's there a kid here?" I only hesitated for 2 seconds before calmly stepping inside anyway. After all, time wasn't on my side. My ruthless mother had beaten me for 3 straight hours, yet she'd only given me half a day off. By 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'd have to drag myself back to school. On top of that, Guangming Casino didn't even open until 11 o'clock at night. Sneaking out under the cover of night was my only option. It was already 11:30 p.m. and I had to be back home by 2:30 a.m. so I could get some sleep. Otherwise, I'd definitely be late for school the next morning. The taxi ride home alone would take an hour, which meant I had less than 2 hours to make money. Still, that would be more than enough. As soon as I stepped inside, a strong smell of cigarette smoke hit my nose, making me feel sick. I almost threw up on the spot and couldn't help coughing in disgust. Maybe my reaction worked, because the man smoking immediately tossed his cigarette onto the floor and crushed it under his shoe. "Little brother, are you here looking for your parents?" A lazy yet teasing female voice called out. I turned around and saw a young woman wearing a burgundy silk shirt with a faint smile on her face. 2 buttons of her shirt were undone, revealing her elegant collarbone whenever she moved. I only glanced at her once before looking away. Zia Murin's beautiful eyes curved into a smile, and her voice became even gentler. She clearly hadn't expected me to lose interest after a single glance, and a hint of surprise flashed across her eyes, as if she found my reaction rather interesting. Thinking I was just another awkward teenager, she didn't mind my cold attitude and instead became even more curious. "This isn't exactly a place for kids to have fun. Did you get lost?" I remained silent. Seeing that I still wasn't interested in talking, Zia Murin gave a subtle look to the woman standing on the far left. Su Kaienkian glanced at me before lowering her eyes and quietly studying the student-like boy standing in front of her. The expression hidden beneath the shadows made it impossible to tell what she was thinking. Just then, the elevator doors slowly opened. Without saying a word, I strode inside first, while the 3 of them followed behind me. The casino manager recognized them immediately and rushed over with a respectful smile to greet them. Zia Murin casually draped an arm over Su Kaienkian's shoulder and laughed. "Do kids these days seriously enjoy hanging around casinos?" Shen Qingzhu rolled her eyes and folded her arms as she confidently headed toward the 2nd floor. "I'm just curious how that kid managed to get in here." Su Kaienkian's gaze lingered in the direction I'd gone before she quietly instructed the manager, "Go verify his invitation." The manager nodded and hurried away. Guangming Casino was the largest underground casino in the capital, and its luxurious interior was no less impressive than any world-famous gambling resort. More than 20 different games were available, every table was packed with players, and the entire hall buzzed with excitement as cheers and sighs mixed together. Well-dressed men and women immersed themselves in the glamorous atmosphere, while expensive jewelry and designer watches silently showed off their wealth. Everywhere I looked was a feast for the senses. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in dazzling light, reflecting off the flushed faces of the gamblers below. It had been a long time since I'd stepped into a casino, and standing here again gave me the strange feeling of returning home. Compared to everyone else, the 20,000 yuan in my pocket probably made me the poorest person in the entire casino. I exchanged every last cent for chips before walking straight toward the roulette table. A round had just ended. Amid cheers from the winners and frustrated sighs from the losers, the beautiful dealer, dressed in a perfectly tailored uniform, smiled sweetly as she swiftly cleared the table before announcing, "Ladies and gentlemen, betting for the next round is now open." The moment I walked over, countless eyes immediately landed on me. My mask and cap made me stand out from everyone else, and my build made it obvious that I looked like a student. Naturally, people couldn't stop staring. Roulette was played on a spinning wheel with numbered pockets ranging from green 0 to alternating red and black numbers 1 through 36. The dealer would launch the ball onto the spinning wheel, and once it settled into a numbered pocket, the winning number would be decided. Players could bet on a single number for the highest payout of 35 to 1, or they could play it safe by betting on colors, odd or even, high or low, or several numbers at once. The lower the risk, the lower the payout. While many people had already placed their bets, quite a few were still watching and waiting. I happened to be one of them because I intended to go for the highest risk, highest reward option. If I pushed all 20,000 yuan onto a single number and lost, I'd walk away with nothing. But if I won, I'd instantly turn it into 720,000 yuan. It was an all-or-nothing gamble, and that was exactly how I liked to play. With a practiced motion, the dealer launched the small white ball onto the spinning wheel. As both the wheel and the ball spun rapidly, I shut out all the noise around me and calmly calculated everything in my head. A few moments later, I pushed every single one of my chips onto black 33. The people around me looked at me as though I'd completely lost my mind. Very few players on the first floor dared to bet like this. Experienced gamblers usually spread their bets across several numbers to improve their odds, while even the bolder ones rarely placed everything on fewer than 3 numbers. Someone like me who walked up and immediately bet everything on a single number was almost unheard of. Damn, this guy actually bet everything on one number. Ha ha ha, he's basically here to donate money. How'd this kid even get in here? He looks underage. He probably has no idea what he's doing. If you don't know how to play, just watch instead of making a fool of yourself. Their laughter, mockery, and sighs filled the air, but my expression never changed. Since the amount of chips in front of me wasn't much, everyone simply treated me like a source of entertainment. I ignored every single comment. If this had happened anywhere else, my temper would have exploded already. But inside a casino, keeping a low profile was the smartest choice. I was here to make money, not enemies. Walking out with my winnings safely would be the real victory. An older woman beside me kindly leaned over and said, "First time playing, little brother? Let me give you some advice. Betting everything on a single number isn't something you should do without experience. Don't throw your money away like this. Even a small amount of money is still money. It's fine to spend it for fun, but losing it for no reason isn't worth it." Meanwhile, upstairs in one of the private VIP rooms were expensive wine. The private VIP rooms upstairs were even more luxurious than the gaming hall below. Every kind of entertainment imaginable was available, and through the floor-to-ceiling windows, guests could overlook most of the casino. Shen Qingzhu lazily leaned against the window, a slim cigarette resting between her fingers as she casually tapped it against the frame. Suddenly, her gaze froze on something below. Her eyes narrowed, then instantly widened in surprise. "Come here, quick, look what I found," she exclaimed, grabbing Zia Murin, who had been pouring herself a drink, and dragging her to the window. Zia Murin had barely taken a sip before being interrupted. She frowned in annoyance and complained, "This better be a ridiculously handsome guy, or I'm seriously going to beat you up." But the moment she looked in the direction Shen Qingzhu was pointing, she immediately spotted me standing beside the roulette table. Her eyes widened, and she was so shocked that she couldn't speak for several seconds. "What's going on?" Su Kaienqian had just finished a phone call and put away her phone when she noticed the stunned expressions on their faces. Curious, she walked over. "Sister Kaian, you'll never guess this. That underage kid actually sneaked into the casino and is gambling," Zia Murin said in disbelief before adding with a laugh, "If that's true, doesn't that mean the owner of this place could end up in prison for a few years?" She still looked completely dazed. Su Kaienqian looked toward the roulette table downstairs, and a faint smile slowly appeared on her lips. "I don't know, but is that really the first thing you should be worried about?" Zia Murin shot her an annoyed look before asking, "Have you found out who that kid is yet? The bodyguards wouldn't have let him in without an invitation, but how did an invitation end up in his hands?" Su Kaienqian elegantly took a sip of her wine and gently shook her head. "Not yet." Shen Qingzhu never took her eyes off the roulette table. With a serious expression, she said, "I'm telling you, this kid isn't ordinary. He pushed every single chip onto black 33. But honestly, that's an unbelievably reckless move." Even Su Kaienqian looked surprised by that decision. Besides the three of them, the rest of their friends were busy enjoying themselves around the gaming tables. Seeing the three women standing by the window instead of joining them, someone called out for them to come over and play. Shen Qingzhu waved her hand and declined. The others didn't insist because everyone knew these three women were the real VIPs in the room. Downstairs, the roulette wheel gradually slowed. Every gambler around the table unconsciously held their breath, and the entire casino seemed to fall silent as all eyes locked onto the tiny white ball spinning around the wheel. I was the only exception. I looked completely relaxed without the slightest hint of nervousness. In fact, I even pulled out my phone and casually scrolled through short videos. After checking the timing, the dealer announced loudly, "No more bets." She gracefully swept her arm over the table, forcing several players who had been hesitating to reluctantly stop placing chips. As the ball slowed, I put away my phone and looked back at the wheel. The atmosphere became more and more tense, while the beautiful dealer maintained her professional smile. Our eyes met briefly. She noticed that I was smiling at her, and the smile on her face became noticeably warmer, almost as if she were silently wishing me good luck. Finally, the little white ball bounced one last time before dropping perfectly into black 33. The entire casino instantly erupted with deafening screams of shock. Every pair of eyes turned toward me, the young boy standing beside the table. The commotion was so loud that even the people upstairs heard it clearly. Zia Murin couldn't stop shouting, "Holy shit! Holy shit!" She got so excited that she nearly jumped into the air before Su Kaienkian quickly grabbed her arm to calm her down. "That's unbelievable. What kind of insane luck is that? His luck is absolutely ridiculous." Even Shen Qingzhu was stunned. She had originally thought I was just fearless, but she never expected my luck to be this outrageous. It almost felt as though the god of fortune was living inside my pocket. Is this what people call beginner's luck? If I'd known, I would have shown off like that the first time I played too. The scene left countless gamblers feeling both amazed and jealous. Everyone dreamed of experiencing a moment like this, but opportunities like these were incredibly rare. Su Kaienkian, however, wasn't convinced it was simply luck. She had clearly noticed that the boy downstairs hadn't placed his bet until after the ball had already begun spinning. If he were really a complete beginner or simply playing for fun, he would have placed his bet before the wheel started. Instead, he patiently waited until the ball had circled the wheel twice before decisively pushing all of his chips onto a single number. To Su Kaienkian, someone with no experience would never gamble like that. Just then, someone knocked on the VIP room door. The casino manager quickly walked over, respectfully handed a folder of information to the three women, and quietly stepped back. The contents of the file were almost suspiciously clean. At first glance, everything looked perfectly normal, but anyone with experience could immediately tell it was nothing more than a hastily fabricated profile. In other words, every piece of information inside was fake, except for the gender. Downstairs, the young female dealer couldn't help stealing another glance at the boy whose cap was pulled so low that it almost hid his face. She had worked in casinos long enough to develop an excellent eye for reading people. She had seen every kind of gambler imaginable. Wealthy older women dressed in designer brands often came looking for excitement, casually losing tens of millions without batting an eye because, to them, money was simply entertainment. Then there were the gamblers covered in gold and expensive watches, people who chased even greater thrills. Every game they played involved astonishing amounts of money, where a single round could determine the rise or fall of an entire fortune. That terrifying rush between heaven and hell gave them an excitement comparable to an addiction. But someone like me was completely different. From the moment I entered, I had a clear goal, made my move decisively, and hit the target in a single attempt. My presence felt completely out of place compared to everyone else around me. People like that were usually invited upstairs to the VIP floor without delay. Gwangaming Casino was divided into two levels. The first floor was open to wealthy guests who possessed an invitation, all of whom had been carefully selected before earning the right to enter. Although they were influential figures within their own circles, they could only remain on the first floor. The second floor, however, was an entirely different world. It existed exclusively for those standing at the very top of society, the wealthiest families, old aristocratic clans, and individuals whose fortunes ranked among the richest in the world. Naturally, everything upstairs was hundreds of times more extravagant than what the first floor had to offer. The true masters of gambling were all gathered on the second floor. Everyone working at Gwangaming Casino was exceptionally capable. Before they were allowed to work, they underwent training in multiple foreign languages because the casino attracted countless foreign entrepreneurs and wealthy guests. Naturally, their salaries were just as impressive. My meaning was very clear. If I win this next round, the tip is yours. Normally, players only tip the dealer after winning a large amount of money, casually tossing 1 or 2 chips their way. But for a young boy like me to say something like that before the game had even started meant only one thing. I was absolutely confident that I would win. The dealer's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't help stealing another glance at me, completely caught off guard by my confidence and composure. The second round soon began. Ladies and gentlemen, betting is now open. The female dealer's crisp, pleasant voice blended with the scent of alcohol and tobacco, making the atmosphere even more intoxicating. The excitement in the casino instantly intensified, and even more people gathered around the table than before. News had already spread that someone downstairs had won a huge amount by betting everything on a single roulette number. Curious spectators abandoned their own games and crowded around just to witness what would happen next. In the blink of an eye, I was surrounded by people on all sides. The air became stuffy, filled with the mixed smells of cigarettes, alcohol, and perfume. I quietly took a deep breath and endured it. One more game. After this, I'm switching tables. My previous bet had paid out at 35-1, turning my original 20,000 yuan into more than 700,000. I absent-mindedly played with the pile of chips between my fingers while waiting for the dealer's next move. With a sharp metallic sound, the little silver ball shot onto the spinning roulette wheel, bouncing rapidly across the alternating red and black numbers. Until the dealer officially announced the end of betting, players were free to place their wagers at any moment. The slower the ball became, the more people rushed to bet because they believed they had a better chance of predicting where it would land. The gamblers around me stared nervously at the spinning wheel, while the spectators watched me instead. Everyone wanted to know whether Lady Luck would smile upon this young boy once again. The atmosphere was so tense it felt frozen in time, yet I remained completely relaxed. I casually picked up a slice of cake, lowered my mask, and took a small bite. The cake had been brought over by the kind, older woman who had warned me earlier. Gwangaming Casino even had its own gourmet dining area. As the most famous casino in the capital, it spared no expense on food, hiring internationally renowned chefs and introducing new dishes every day. After one bite, however, I calmly put down the golden spoon. Average, barely acceptable. Seeing my reaction, the kind woman couldn't help asking, "Isn't it good?" I asked one of the staff members earlier, and they said this cake is their most popular dessert. I casually set the spoon aside and answered in a calm voice, "The cream is too heavy. It completely overpowers the flavor. Overall, it's just average." The woman froze in surprise. She honestly hadn't noticed that at all. After thinking about it for a moment, I decided to give Gwangaming's desserts one more chance. I lightly patted the woman's shoulder and smiled. "Big sis, could you help me get a slice of tiramisu too? Thanks." While the roulette wheel continued spinning at high speed and everyone around me was either nervous or excited, the center of attention in the entire casino was busy thinking about dessert. For a moment, the woman didn't know whether she should worry about me or admire how calm I was. The truth was, I'd long since lost the ability to feel nervous. I'd already experienced bankruptcy, crushing debt, and losing everything more than once in my previous life. Compared to all that, a roulette table was nothing. I wasn't especially talented. I simply had more experience than most people. Looking at my carefree attitude, the woman quietly squeezed through the crowd, deciding it was probably better to stop worrying about me and just go get the tiramisu instead. The moment everyone saw me once again place every chip on a single number, the entire table erupted into another wave of disbelief. Doubts, ridicule, shock, and mockery echoed from every direction, while every pair of eyes remained fixed on the spinning wheel and the tiny white ball. Upstairs, the three women were still standing by the window, silently observing everything below. Seeing me casually eating cake while being surrounded by hundreds of people, Zia Murin suddenly felt hungry herself and grabbed a slice from a nearby tray. As she took a bite, she asked curiously, "He's already won over 700,000 yuan. Why is he still playing? Isn't he afraid of losing it all?" The boy fascinated her more and more. At first, she'd assumed he was just an innocent kid who had wandered into the wrong place. Then he shocked everyone by winning a single number bet. But instead of leaving with his winnings, he stayed for another round, and once again bet everything on a single number. Was he unbelievably confident, or was he simply here to throw money away? Su Kaianqian's eyelashes fluttered slightly as she quietly observed the scene below. There was an indescribable calmness surrounding her, making her seem impossible to read. She finished the wine in her glass, gently placed it on the table, and spoke in an indifferent tone. "Maybe he'll actually win again." Shen Qingzhu immediately caught the deeper meaning behind those words. She glanced downstairs before turning back toward Su Kaianqian with a raised eyebrow. "You really think that kid can hit another single number?" Su Kaianqian smiled faintly instead of answering directly. "Don't you?" Shen Qingzhu shook her head. "I can't say for sure." Logically, I don't believe it, but my instincts keep telling me that boy isn't as simple as he looks. Let's wait and see. At that moment, Zia Murin took out her phone to check the time before nudging Su Kaienkian with her elbow. Has she still not arrived? Su Kaienkian gave a helpless snort. She said she isn't coming. She's busy again. Busy? She's always busy. What could she possibly be so busy with every single day? Hearing that Su Nyanchu wouldn't be coming, Zia Murin collapsed dramatically onto the sofa in disappointment. She genuinely couldn't understand why her best friend spent every day buried in company affairs. Could anything in that company really be more attractive than hanging out with us? After complaining for a while, she suddenly sprang back up with her eyes sparkling. I've got an idea. Why don't we make a bet too? Let's bet on whether that kid wins this round. Zia Murin had loved stirring up excitement ever since she was little. Gwangaming Casino was originally nothing more than one of her personal entertainment projects, built as a place for her and her friends to have fun. But because the decorations turned out so luxurious, it gradually evolved into an exclusive membership casino and unexpectedly became the #1 casino in the capital. She seemed to be one of those rare people who succeeded at almost everything she touched. Shen Qingzhu waved her hand at her in annoyance. Get lost. This is practically your home ground. Who would be stupid enough to gamble against you? If you want to play, go bother someone else. Zia Murin pouted. How boring. I was even planning to wager the development rights to that piece of land in the western suburbs against you too. Fine then, I'll take the bet. Shen Qingzhu immediately became interested. Zia Murin looked at her in disbelief, clutching her chest as though her heart had been shattered. Zio Qing, you've changed. Since when did you become so greedy? Have I ever let you go without food or clothes? Ever since we were kids, whenever I got something good, didn't I always share it with you? Shen Qingzhu rolled her eyes without hesitation. Oh, please. What exactly have you ever given me? Weren't all your exam papers copied from mine? And don't even get me started on those boyfriends of yours. The more she thought about it, the more annoyed she became. The two of them had known each other since elementary school. The Zia family had always been incredibly strict with their children, hiring private tutors from a young age and demanding excellence in everything. The Shen family, on the other hand, believed in letting children grow on their own. They provided resources, but whether you succeeded depended entirely on your own ability. Shen Qingzhu had originally been a free bird, but after meeting Zia Murin, she'd been dragged into private tutoring as well, and even ended up helping her with homework and exam papers. By the time they reached high school, Zia Murin had a habit of attracting admirers everywhere she went. Whenever someone became too persistent, and she couldn't be bothered dealing with them anymore, she dumped the problem onto Shen Qingzhu to clean up afterward. If Zia Murin weren't her best friend, Shen Qingzhu often felt she'd have buried her with a shovel long ago. Thinking about all of that, she let out another exasperated sigh before saying, I'm betting he loses. Then I bet he loses too, Zia Murin said with a grin before turning towards Su Kaienkian. Kaian, what about you? Su Kaienkian kept her eyes fixed on me downstairs as I calmly enjoyed my dessert. At that exact moment, I suddenly glanced toward the second floor, almost as if I'd sensed someone watching me. The corners of her lips curled into a smile. I bet he wins. For some reason, I suddenly felt a chill run down my back. I turned around and scanned the surroundings but couldn't spot anyone suspicious. My tiramisu was already more than half finished. Not bad. If a casino couldn't even make a decent tiramisu, then the pastry chef might as well pack up and go home to grow sweet potatoes instead. The roulette wheel gradually slowed as the tiny white ball continued circling the outer edge. The green numbers on the electronic display changed rapidly. After making 2 final laps, the ball finally bounced inward toward the numbered pockets. Every player who had placed a bet unconsciously held their breath. Then, in the very next second, the little white ball settled perfectly into red 13. A cheerful whistle escaped my lips. In an excellent mood, I casually grabbed a handful of chips and tossed them toward the dealer before smiling and giving her a slight nod. These are for you. The dealer's eyes widened in shock. She forced herself to remain calm while discreetly pressing the silent alarm beneath the table to notify the surveillance room. Outwardly, she simply smiled and bowed her head politely. Thank you. My tip was astonishingly generous. On the first floor, players usually rewarded dealers with 1 or 2 chips after a big win, rarely more than 5. I, on the other hand, had casually thrown over a 6-figure tip onto the table. The older woman standing beside me almost had her eyelids twitching uncontrollably. When she saw where the ball had landed, she looked even more excited than I did, her heart practically jumping out of her chest. It seemed as though she was only 1 step away from leaping into the air herself. Ironically, I was the one comforting her. Relax, relax. Her face flushed bright red with excitement as she stared at me in disbelief. Young man, you just won 2 single-number bets in a row. How can you be this calm? It's not like I've never experienced winning before, I thought to myself, though I wisely kept those words inside. After 2 consecutive victories, the looks people gave me completely changed. The contempt from earlier had turned into amazement, admiration, and even worship. A few people wanted to approach me, convinced I possessed some mysterious secret. Of course, where there was admiration, there was also suspicion, especially from those who had lost money this round. Their expressions were filled with disbelief. This isn't possible. There's no way. How can anyone hit 2 single-number bets in a row? Did you work together with the dealer? Or are you using some kind of high-tech cheating device? Otherwise, there's no way you could win twice. Miss Dealer, I'm an honest citizen, someone shouted sarcastically. Where's the manager? Get the manager over here. This kid has to be cheating. What is this, a movie? This is way too fake. Upstairs, Zia Murin was so stunned that she'd almost forgotten she'd just lost the bet involving the development rights to the land in the western suburbs. She even rubbed her eyes and shook her head, wondering if she'd somehow seen everything wrong. How can he be this incredible? Su Kaienkian, on the other hand, smiled comfortably like someone who had expected this outcome all along. Looks like I won without even trying. Zia Murin shot her an exasperated look. She wins the bet and still acts so smug. She complained inwardly, though she didn't dare actually say it aloud. Suddenly, Shen Qingzhu frowned. Something's wrong. She looked downstairs at the increasingly chaotic crowd. That kid seems to be in trouble. They're accusing him of cheating. Su Kaienkian immediately stepped closer to the window and looked down. The first floor had already descended into complete chaos. I had intended to cash out my chips and leave quietly, but the crowd blocked my path, refusing to let me go until I explained myself. Explain what? All I'd done was apply a little physics. By calculating the ball's starting speed, the wheel's rotation, the angle of movement, and the likely landing zone. Then adding a little luck. I'd made my prediction, that was all. The casino was already stuffy enough with all the smoke, and now the packed crowd made it even harder to breathe. Annoying, so annoying. Without another word, I kicked the edge of the roulette table with a loud bang. The entire hall instantly fell silent. I slowly withdrew my foot and looked helplessly at the people surrounding me. Enough was enough. Can all of you shut up? I said coldly. What is this, a marketplace? Why are you making so much noise? If you can't handle losing, then don't gamble. Just because you're bad at it doesn't mean nobody else is allowed to be good. Didn't any of you ever go to school? Haven't you heard that there's always someone better? Every one of you is covered in expensive jewelry and designer clothes, yet after losing a little money, you're screaming like children. Aren't you embarrassed? Most of the people there were powerful figures who spent their lives giving orders to others. They'd never been publicly scolded by someone young enough to be their son. Being humiliated in front of everyone by a teenager made them lose face instantly, and tempers exploded. Watch your mouth, one of them shouted angrily. Didn't your parents teach you any manners? Call your family over. This isn't over yet. Before anyone could move toward me, the kind, older woman beside me stepped protectively in front of me, shielding me from the angry crowd. Clearly dissatisfied with a group of grown adults ganging up on a teenager, she said firmly, "What's wrong with all of you? You're all adults. Why are you picking on a child? He won fair and square. What's the point of making such a scene? In a casino like this, people win and lose millions every day. Is that really something worth causing such an ugly commotion over?" I leisurely added from behind her, "It's because they lost to a man, and not just any man, but a kid who's still in school." The older woman turned around and gave me a complicated look. My words had hit everyone right where it hurt, and instead of calming down, they became even more embarrassed and started arguing all over again. With an impatient sigh, I kicked the roulette table even harder than before. The deafening bang echoed throughout the hall, instantly silencing the crowd once again. The dealer had already retreated to a safe distance, clearly afraid of getting caught in the crossfire. Even the older woman swallowed nervously. Thank goodness I didn't provoke this young master, she thought. With that kind of strength, if he kicked a person instead of the table, nobody would be driving them home tonight. They'd be leaving in an ambulance. I slowly swept my cold gaze across the crowd, irritably pulled off my cap before putting it back on and asked, "So, are you moving or not? If you keep blocking my way, I'll call the police and have every single one of you taken away." The spectators on the outer edge immediately scattered. Watching the drama was one thing, but getting dragged into a police investigation was another. Even so, one stubborn man shouted, "At the very least, the manager has to come over. We can't let you leave until he confirms you didn't cheat." As if on cue, the casino manager hurried over. The moment he arrived, he immediately recognized the boy who had won 2 consecutive single-number bets. After receiving the dealer's silent alarm, the surveillance team had already reviewed every camera angle several times in slow motion. In the end, they all reached the same conclusion. There wasn't a single suspicious movement. The kid had spent the entire time either scrolling through his phone or eating cake. There wasn't the slightest sign of cheating, which left only one explanation. The boy's skill was genuine. The moment the manager arrived, everyone surrounded him and began complaining at once. After patiently listening to them, the experienced manager smiled politely before speaking. "Thank you all for helping us maintain order. We've already reviewed the surveillance footage, and this young gentleman did not cheat in any way. Please disperse." The crowd instantly fell silent. "How is that possible?" someone muttered. "Can a person really reach this level? Isn't that basically the skill of a gambling champion? How can someone so young be this good?" Seeing that they still refused to accept reality, I rolled my eyes. "What? Have you finally realized you've wasted decades of your lives? Believe it or don't. Now get out of my way." The manager quickly stepped in, smiling awkwardly as he tried to smooth things over. The man I'd just mocked turned bright red with embarrassment. Feeling the judgmental stares from everyone around him, he could only snort angrily before storming off. I, on the other hand, was thoroughly annoyed. These people have seriously never seen the world before. My original plan had been simple: win 2 rounds, switch to another game, and keep making money. Who would have thought that just 2 victories would completely shatter these people's confidence? Back when I played in casinos overseas, I'd won 5 games in a row without anyone making this kind of scene. Upstairs, Zia Murin clicked her tongue in amusement. "That kid's pretty violent," she watched with great interest. "Those 2 kicks probably left dents in the roulette table. Think we should make him pay for the damage?" Shen Qingzhu simply smiled. He had no choice. "Did you see that crowd? They looked like wolves surrounding a piece of meat. They wanted to tear him apart." She couldn't hide the contempt in her heart. A bunch of narrow-minded nouveau riches, ganging up on a child over something this trivial. No wonder they'll never amount to anything. Su Kaienqian calmly returned to the sofa. Her sharply defined features gave her an elegant yet distant aura. She looked toward Zia Murin and said meaningfully, "Your invitations really are easy to get." Everyone immediately understood the sarcasm hidden in those words. Shen Qingzhu burst out laughing. Zia Murin merely shrugged without the slightest embarrassment and immediately ordered the staff, "Throw out everyone who caused trouble just now. Permanently ban them from Guangaming Casino." Those people instantly regretted everything. They wished they could slap themselves twice. Guangaming wasn't just a casino. It was one of the most exclusive social circles in the capital. Anyone who entered had the opportunity to build valuable connections with powerful people. Getting permanently banned meant losing that opportunity forever. Leaning against the window, Zia Murin watched me wandering around downstairs before another idea suddenly popped into her head. "I want to make another bet with that kid." Just as I was about to sit down at another table, someone suddenly reached out and stopped me. Turning around, I found the smiling casino manager standing there. I stopped walking and asked, "What is it?" The manager respectfully withdrew his hand, gave me a slight bow, and smiled brightly. "Young master, our boss would like to invite you upstairs. Please come to the 2nd floor." The boss. I instinctively tightened my grip on the chips in my hand and frowned. Why would Guangaming's boss want to see me? Didn't we already clear up what happened downstairs? Every cliché from countless novels about villains getting lured into traps flashed through my mind. I couldn't help shivering before decisively shaking my head. No. As the story's villain, my identity was far too sensitive. There was no way I was willingly putting myself in danger. What if something happened? Seeing the caution in my eyes, the manager quickly explained, "Please don't worry, young master. Our boss sincerely wishes to meet you. This isn't about causing trouble." Still not going. My attitude remained firm. What a joke. You're the manager here. Of course you're going to speak on your boss's behalf. If something happens to me later, are you really going to help me? I'd be lucky if you didn't join in. Unable to persuade me, the helpless manager could only call his boss for help. The moment Zia Murin heard what was happening, she shot out of the VIP room like a rocket, rushed into the hallway, and shouted loudly, "Hey, little friend, it's me. Come upstairs and play." Standing there with a carefree grin and his shirt collar slightly open, he looked every bit like an unreliable playboy while enthusiastically waving at me. I looked at him, then slowly turned toward the manager with an expression that said everything. The manager forced an awkward laugh before lowering his head in embarrassment. "Boss, could you please act a little more dignified?" In the end, I reluctantly went upstairs anyway. Shen Qingzhu quietly reminded Zia Murin not to scare me too much. The three of them had already moved into another empty VIP room, so when I entered, the only people I saw were the same three I'd met in the elevator earlier. What a coincidence. I met the boss and her friends just by taking an elevator. Wait, doesn't that mean my fake invitation could be exposed at any moment? Suddenly, the chips in my pocket didn't feel nearly as secure anymore. I had to admit, though, the second floor was on an entirely different level. The first floor had already looked incredibly luxurious, but compared to this place, it felt almost ordinary. Zia Murin enthusiastically grabbed my arm, pulled me over to the sofa, and practically forced me to sit down before introducing herself. "Hi, my name is Zia Murin. Watching you play roulette downstairs was incredible." The moment I heard that name, my expression stiffened. Zia Murin. Wasn't she the female villain from the novel? The one hopelessly obsessed with the male lead, who clung to him like glue no matter how many times he rejected her, and eventually became his enemy out of love. Before I could think any further, the woman beside her smiled gently and introduced herself as well. "Hello, I'm Shen Qingzhu. You can call me Qingzhu." My scalp instantly tingled. Shen Qingzhu? Wasn't she the woman who nearly killed the heroine on the operating table just to steal the male lead? My eyes instinctively filled with admiration. Standing there, she radiated calm confidence. Her sharp facial features, long, narrow eyes, and naturally distant expression gave her an intimidating aura that made people unconsciously keep their distance. Which meant the only person left had to be Su Kaienqian. So this is Su Kaienqian, the ultimate villain of the novel. The woman who had nearly driven the heroine to her death and would have succeeded if the head of the Su family hadn't personally begged for mercy. Unlike Yi Jia and the other love-struck villains who acted out of blind obsession, these three all lived by one principle. If I can't have it, then no one can. Well, with one exception. Su Kaienqian wasn't motivated by romance at all. Everything she did was solely to protect her position as the heir of the Su family. Well, this is unexpected. I suddenly relaxed. Looks like I've walked straight into the villain's headquarters, but strangely enough, I wasn't worried anymore. After all, villains were practically one big family. According to the novel's setting, the capital was ruled by four great families: Su, Zia, Yi, and Shen. The Su family ranked first. They had settled in the imperial capital during the Ming and Qing dynasties, possessed royal bloodline ancestry, owned businesses spanning both domestic and international markets, and had even produced two founding generals in the nation's history. The Su family had deep roots in both the military and political worlds, and Su Kaienqian was the only direct heir of the entire Su family. What kind of situation is this? I couldn't help thinking. Did all the villains gather here for a meeting or something? Zia Murin smiled and asked, "So, little friend, what should we call you?" Zia Murin was breathtakingly beautiful, but hers was the kind of beauty that carried an intimidating edge. Her long, slender eyes shimmered with a watery brilliance, and whenever she relaxed her expression, a lazy, effortless charm naturally surrounded her. Tilting her head slightly, she stared into my eyes, her gaze slowly wandering across my face. There was no hostility in her eyes. She simply looked me over as though she were quietly memorizing what I looked like. I lowered my gaze, completely ignoring her question, and got straight to the point. "Why did you bring me here?" Su Kaienqian glanced sideways at me and raised an eyebrow. "You're quite cautious." Zia Murin laughed. "How about playing a game with me? You can decide the stakes and conditions however you like." She clearly didn't mind that I'd ignored her earlier question. She had always been a straightforward person who hated beating around the bush, and meeting someone equally direct only made her like me even more. "I get to choose the conditions." The moment I heard that, my eyebrows lifted slightly, and a glimmer flashed across my eyes. Looking into Zia Murin's smiling gaze, my mind immediately began racing. These villains are all ridiculously rich. Losing a few million shouldn't even make them blink. They probably won't think it's strange. What Zia Murin didn't realize was that although I displayed courage far beyond my age at the roulette table downstairs, she still believed that once I reached the second floor, that little bit of cleverness wouldn't be enough. "How about blackjack?" she suggested. "Sure." I agreed without a moment's hesitation, secretly thinking that she'd chosen well. Blackjack had been the very first casino game I'd mastered. Shen Qingzhu paused halfway through taking a sip of wine when she saw how quickly I agreed. Shooting Zia Murin an annoyed glance, she nodded toward me and said, "Why don't you ask him what the minimum bet is first? What if she tricks you?" Zia Murin immediately grabbed a cushion and threw it at Shen Qingzhu. "What are you talking about? Do I look like that kind of person?" Then she smiled at me again. "How about this? We won't play too big. Let's keep it small. 20 million. Is that okay?" The moment those words left her mouth, the room fell into a strange silence. Su Kaienkian remained standing quietly, observing me without saying a single word. Zia Murin blinked in confusion. Was 20 million too much? But this kid already won several million downstairs. Shen Qingzhu secretly gave me a thumbs up in her heart. Smart kid. He actually managed to stump this old fox, but my next sentence nearly made her spit out her wine. "I was actually about to say," I replied calmly, "that I need to win at least 100 million. Anything less isn't worth playing." Shen Qingzhu gasped in shock, while Zia Murin let out an equally stunned "huh." Before coming upstairs, I'd already checked the time. It was past midnight now, and I had less than an hour and a half left. Those idiots downstairs wasted too much of my time. Blackjack was slower than roulette, so if I wanted to finish my mission and get home in time, I had no choice but to increase the stakes. "Any problem with that?" Zia Murin was obviously surprised by my confidence, but she quickly smiled and nodded. "No problem, we'll do it your way." Deep down, she figured that if I lost everything, she'd simply stop the game before I buried myself in debt. She didn't want a teenager going home owing a fortune and getting beaten up by his parents. She still had that much kindness in her. By now, Shen Qingzhu looked at me with nothing but admiration. Just this fearless attitude alone would have made me a legendary figure in any school. Once the rules were settled, the four of us walked over to the card table. I casually picked a seat and sat down. Su Kaienkian, who had barely spoken the entire time, quietly pulled out the chair beside mine and sat next to me. I glanced at her, and she responded with a faint smile. Noticing the caution in my eyes, Zia Murin laughed. "Little brother, be careful around her. She just won a piece of my land." A piece of land. I glanced at Su Kaienkian. Somehow, seeing Zia Murin lose made me feel oddly satisfied. The dealer randomly removed 4 cards from the deck, placed them face down into the discard box, and announced that they would no longer be used. After shuffling the remaining cards, he happily handed the deck over to Zia Murin. Smiling from ear to ear, she took the dealer's seat. "I'll be the banker. Everyone, place your bets." The four of us each pushed our chips forward. This time, I didn't bet everything. I simply placed the minimum wager of 100 million. Roulette had its own strategy, and blackjack naturally had its own as well. Once everyone had placed their bets, Zia Murin skillfully flicked cards from the deck with practiced ease. Her smile never faded, and her smooth movements made it obvious she was an experienced player. Everyone received 2 cards. As the banker, Zia Murin's face-up card was a black 3. I glanced at my own hand, the 3 of diamonds and the 8 of hearts, giving me 11 points. Instead of checking her own cards, Su Kaienkian quietly observed my expression. Ever since watching me play roulette downstairs, she'd felt there was something unusual about me. I was far too calm. After seeing me come upstairs, that feeling only grew stronger. An 18-year-old being personally invited by the casino owner was already strange enough, yet here I was sitting among veteran gamblers without showing even the slightest trace of nervousness. None of it made sense. An ordinary student would never have the courage to sit at this table. On top of that, I'd somehow managed to obtain an invitation through my own methods. So why exactly did this boy come to the casino? Feeling her staring at me again, I frowned and turned toward her. "Why are you looking at me? Do I have the words villain written across my face?" I wasn't afraid of Su Kaienkian in the slightest. After all, what could possibly be scarier than being thrown into prison by the novel's male and female leads? Su Kaienkian froze for a brief moment before suddenly laughing. She lowered her gaze to her cards and softly said, "Sorry." It was rare enough to hear Su Kaienkian apologize that even Zia Murin and Shen Qingzhu looked surprised. Zia Murin couldn't resist teasing her. "Yeah, why are you staring at little brother? Just because he's handsome doesn't mean you get to keep looking." The game continued. As one of the players, Su Kaienkian remained perfectly composed. After drawing 2 more cards, she calmly raised her hand. "I'll stand." Then it was my turn. Zia Murin smiled brightly. "Little brother, you're up." Her playful tone was strangely charming. Her face-up card was a 3, while her hidden card turned out to be a 6, giving her 9 points. If she drew another 6 or a 10, she'd have a very strong hand. She nervously rubbed her hands together before carefully lifting one corner of the card. The instant she saw it, she burst into loud laughter. A 10! My luck is unbelievable. Thank heaven. Thank the god of fortune. Thank my parents. Thank all my ancestors for watching over me. She hadn't even revealed the card yet, but she'd already thanked every deity and ancestor she could think of. It was obvious she thought victory was guaranteed. Unable to bear her antics any longer, Su Kaienkian smacked the back of her head. Enough! Show your cards! Zia Murin proudly laid them on the table, 19 points. Shen Qingzhu let out a helpless sigh before revealing her own hand, 17 points. Finally, it was my turn. 3 pairs of eyes instantly focused on the cards lying silently in front of me. Even Zia Murin unconsciously held her breath. A faint smile appeared on my lips as I calmly flipped over both of my hands. One hand totaled 19 points while the other came to 20. The moment the cards were revealed, Zia Murin's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. What kind of heavenly luck is this? Since we started playing, your lowest hand has been 19. Are you the reincarnation of the god of luck or something? Even Shen Qingzhu couldn't help clapping her hands in admiration. So when you made those crazy bets downstairs, had you already calculated that you were going to win? It was the question all 3 of them wanted answered. Judging by their expressions, they had already decided I must have known in advance. I simply shook my head. Not completely. After a brief pause, I calmly added, about 98%. Su Kaienkian immediately followed up. Then what about the remaining 2%? I adjusted the cap resting on the back of my head, casually brushed my slightly messy hair aside to reveal my sharp eyebrows, and slowly answered, the remaining 2%. Was just me being modest. The words were outrageously arrogant. Even Zia Murin and Shen Qingzhu, who already knew I had real ability, were stunned by my confidence. Su Kaienkian gently tapped the tabletop with her fingertips while quietly studying my bold expression. Slowly, the corners of her lips lifted into a smile. Good! Someone with real ability should be this confident. That round alone earned me 40 million. Including my original stake, I was already sitting on 50 million. I wasn't far from my goal anymore, but it was still too slow. In reality, the banker always had the advantage. We'd already agreed to rotate the dealer position, and although we could have let the professional dealer continue, I refused. I wanted to be the banker myself and crush everyone at the table. Several more rounds passed, with victories and losses exchanged between all of us. Zia Murin and Shen Qingzhu were both excellent players, but compared to me they were still lacking. Su Kaienkian, however, consistently came out slightly ahead. Her skill was much deeper than it first appeared. Finally, it was my turn to become the banker. I picked up the cards and began shuffling them with practiced ease. The deck seemed to come alive in my hands. With nothing more than a flick of my fingers, the cards danced through the air, flipping, weaving, and neatly stacking themselves together in a dazzling display. Zia Murin watched in amazement, enthusiastically applauding. Beautiful! That was incredible! The truth was, I'd actually worked as a dealer for quite some time. Back then, I'd owed a casino an enormous amount of money that I couldn't repay, so I stayed behind and worked there to pay off my debt. Thanks to my good looks and smooth dealing techniques, plenty of wealthy young women specifically requested that I deal their games. Eventually, several of them became friends with me and even pooled their money together to buy out my contract. After spending so many years inside casinos, every dealing trick and gambling technique had become second nature to me. No matter what game I played, I could control the rhythm with ease. I'd long since repaid the money they lent me. Looking back now, every step on my path toward becoming a gambling master had been paid for with sweat, hardship, and bitter experience. After finishing the shuffle, I slid the cards into the shoe and immediately pushed 30 million worth of chips into the center of the table. The other 3 matched my bet without hesitation. I turned over my face-up card, 6 of hearts. Then I looked directly at Su Kaienkian. Draw! I flicked a card toward her. Just as she reached out to take it, I spoke again. Split. Double the bet. Su Kaienkian glanced at the 4 of hearts and 4 of diamonds in her hand before choosing to split them into 2 separate hands. After drawing 2 more small cards, she unexpectedly raised her hand once again, asking for another card. Even I couldn't help looking at her with renewed interest. Noticing my curiosity, she smiled faintly and explained, "My points are still too low." I nodded. Hit. She drew a 5. I quietly calculated the outcome. Dealer 17, stand. That round ended astonishingly quickly. Su Kaienkian held the highest total. Shen Qingzhu and I tied, but because both of Su Kaienkian's hands beat mine, I lost my entire stake that round. As the games continued, the amount I bet became larger and larger. My lightning-fast dealing speed and rapid pace gradually pushed Zia Muren's concentration to its limit. Her brain frantically calculated which cards remained inside the deck. Finally, the last round arrived. Without the slightest hesitation, I pushed every single chip I owned into the center of the table. The sharp clatter of countless chips crashing together instantly stimulated everyone's nerves. Su Kaienkian slowly lifted her head and narrowed her eyes as they met my calm, clear gaze. A faint smile appeared on her lips before she calmly pushed forward 3/4 of her own chips. Mountains of chips piled onto the table and the stakes skyrocketed. The atmosphere exploded with excitement. Zia Muren was completely fired up now. Without even thinking, she shoved all of her chips into the pot. "I'm all in." Shen Qingzhu was the only one who remained relatively rational. She only matched half the amount, but even that was an astronomical sum. The pot had already reached an unbelievable figure. I glanced down at my own cards without showing the slightest change in expression. Then I revealed one of them, King of Spades, 10 points. Su Kaienkian smiled even more brightly after seeing her own cards. "Looks like your luck really is the best tonight." She casually raised a hand. Before she could speak, I calmly announced, "Hit, next player." It was Shen Qingzhu's turn. She chose to split her hand, then asked for 2 more cards. By the time she finished, a satisfied smile spread across her face. "Looks like Lady Luck is smiling on me after all." She now held 2 excellent hands, 19 points and 18 points. Seeing her smug expression, Zia Muren refused to be outdone. I dealt her another card. She took a deep breath, slowly peeled back one corner, and even closed her eyes while praying. "Please, let it be a 6, just 1 6. A tiny corner of a red heart appeared first. Her fingers moved a little farther. Suddenly, her eyes lit up and she ripped the card fully open. 6 of hearts, she'd made a perfect 21. "Ha-ha, see, Lady Luck chose me, ha-ha-ha-ha." Watching her laugh so wildly, Shen Qingzhu turned her head away in disgust. "Let's see if you're still laughing after you lose." Su Kaienkian rested her chin on one hand, gently tapping the table with her slender fingers as she smiled. "I think Lady Luck has her favorite, but tonight, perhaps it's actually the god of fortune who chose someone." Finally, it was the dealer's turn, my turn. My expression remained completely calm. All 3 women fixed their eyes on the cards in front of me, yet none of them looked particularly nervous anymore. They all seemed convinced the outcome had already been decided. I gently rested my hand on my face-down card. A mysterious smile slowly appeared in my eyes. Su Kaienkian was the first to notice something was wrong. She sighed helplessly as her smile gradually faded. Zia Muren and Shen Qingzhu's smiles also froze on their faces. Then, with one swift motion, I flipped over my hidden card. Ace. In a clear, confident voice, I announced each word slowly, "Blackjack." For a brief moment, complete silence filled the room. Then Zia Muren exploded. "Holy, that's incredible," she laughed helplessly. "Looks like Lady Luck picked you in the end." Across the table, the young boy sat there smiling proudly, his eyes curved into crescents. Su Kaienkian stared at me in a daze. The admiration hidden deep within her eyes only grew stronger. "Is this really just a teenager?" she wondered. "He looks like someone who grew up sitting at gambling tables." In blackjack, an ace together with any 10-point card formed a natural blackjack, the strongest hand possible, beating every other combination of 21. In other words, the instant I revealed those 2 cards, the game had already been decided. Smiling contentedly, I gathered all of the chips back toward myself. What a rewarding night. One hand had earned me hundreds of millions. My assets had now reached 600 million. Putting my cap back on, I neatly packed away my chips, hummed a cheerful tune to myself, and prepared to leave, only to be stopped by Zia Muren. Zia Muren suddenly reached out and blocked my path. I frowned at the hand in front of me and clicked my tongue in annoyance. Seriously, how many times have I been stopped today? I'm not some pig waiting to be slaughtered. Why does everyone feel the need to stop me? Sensing the hostility in my eyes, Zia Muren quickly withdrew her hand and waved both hands in explanation. "No, no, little brother, can we add each other as friends? Please, just add me, okay?" If anyone from outside had seen the usually proud Miss Zia acting like this, their jaws would have hit the floor. Normally, everyone else tried to get close to her. She was never the one chasing after someone for their contact information. Shen Qingzhu silently cursed in her heart, idiot. As for me, I didn't refuse. I simply took out my phone and displayed my QR code. Beside her, Su Kaienqian quietly scanned it as well. With a perfectly measured smile that wasn't the least bit overbearing, she softly said, "Thank you." Oh, even the final boss added me. Seeing that both of them had already added me, Shen Qingzhu figured she might as well follow suit and scan my QR code too. It looked like everyone had enjoyed themselves tonight. I originally planned to exchange my chips for cash, but Zia Murin waved her hand dismissively. "That's too much trouble. Just give me your bank account number. I'll have someone transfer the money directly." That worked perfectly for me. I was happy to save the effort. Every step I took made my whole body ache anyway. The next morning, I'd slept for less than 4 hours. It felt like my soul had been sucked out of my body. During breakfast, Su Fu took one look at me and immediately became irritated. My dark circles were practically hanging into my bowl. "What were you doing last night?" he asked. I wore the face of a walking zombie as I answered one word at a time, "Studying." And doing practice questions. There was no way I could tell him the truth. Even if he died, Su Fu would never imagine that his precious son had spent the night gambling in a real casino. Naturally, he assumed I'd simply stayed up too late studying and immediately gave me another harsh lecture. Go ahead and scold me. I didn't even have the strength to argue back today. Once my sleep schedule was disrupted, I felt like a wilted eggplant that had completely lost its spirit. The only comforting thing was that Su Nyanchu voluntarily got into the car today, saving me the trouble of persuading her. The moment I sat down, I fell asleep almost instantly. Unfortunately, I hadn't been asleep for long before the car came to a stop. The driver gently woke me up. "Young master, we've arrived at school." "It's time to get off." Still half asleep, I slowly opened my eyes and looked at him pitifully. "Uncle Chen, just drive me back home. Even if that old man beats me to death, there's no way I can survive a day of school today." "I'm exhausted." Hearing me call Su Fu, "that old man," Su Nyanchu silently looked at me for a moment before coldly saying only 2 words. "Get out." The driver instantly regretted asking the young miss for help. In the end, I still got out of the car, glaring at him with the betrayed expression of someone who'd just been sold out. The poor driver could only pretend not to notice. Unsurprisingly, I slept through the entire morning. If my stomach hadn't started growling from hunger, I wouldn't have woken up at all. The school cafeteria still wasn't to my taste, so I wandered over to the convenience store and bought a fresh box of strawberries instead. After what happened last time, I decided that no matter how crowded it was, I'd take the elevator. There was no way I was letting another box of strawberries end up feeding the trash can before I even had a chance to finish them. When I returned to the classroom, Jiang Ren covered one side of his face and walked over to me. "You took leave yesterday afternoon. Why didn't you tell me beforehand?" My sleep-deprived brain was a complete mess. I'd completely forgotten that we'd agreed to go to the dessert shop together. "Sorry," I said apologetically. "I caught a cold yesterday. I thought I'd recover by the morning, but I still wasn't feeling well in the afternoon." The moment I mentioned it, I silently cursed Su Fu all over again. That old man is unbelievable. He beat me up and only asked the teacher for half a day's leave. Even if I'd skipped class in the afternoon, he wouldn't have cared. Jiang Ren still looked a little disappointed, so I split my strawberries in half and handed some to him. "I'll go with you this afternoon, deal." His expression finally softened. "Okay, it's a promise." After accepting the strawberries, he returned to his seat and continued reading. Not long afterward, his phone suddenly received a message. He instinctively glanced at me, sleeping face down on my desk, before quietly leaving the classroom. He made his way to the club study room. Lu Cheng sat lazily on the sofa, absent-mindedly twirling a violin bow between his fingers. His face was icy as he glanced toward the trembling boy standing across from him. "They told me Yi Huichuan didn't show up yesterday afternoon." His voice was so cold it seemed capable of freezing the air itself. "Why?" He only looked at Jiang Ren once before looking away in obvious disgust, as though even one extra glance would dirty his eyes. Jiang Ren was so frightened that he immediately started stammering. Before he could finish speaking, the girl sitting beside Lu Cheng suddenly picked up a thick book and smashed it directly into Jiang Ren's face. Smack! A bright red mark instantly appeared across his cheek, and he couldn't help letting out a muffled groan. Another girl glared at him fiercely. "Are you a stutterer? Can't you even speak properly? We asked you a question. Why didn't Yi Huichuan come yesterday?" Holding back tears, Jiang Ren answered in a trembling voice, He took leave yesterday afternoon. I didn't know until the afternoon either. Lu Cheng impatiently turned his head away. You said you'd help us. Is this what you call helping? Looking at Jiang Ren standing there in tears and making such a miserable spectacle of himself, Lu Cheng genuinely wondered if he'd lost his mind for trusting someone this useless. He couldn't even handle such a simple task, causing all of yesterday's preparations to go to waste. Then again, a knife that was delivered to your doorstep could still draw blood, even if it wasn't very sharp. If anyone ever investigated later, what fault would he have? He'd merely complained about a classmate inside the restroom. Someone else with an overwhelming sense of justice had overheard him and insisted on standing up for him. Thinking about it that way, he was practically the victim. Carrying the violin bow in one hand, Lu Cheng slowly walked toward Jiang Ren. Using the tip of the bow, he gently lifted Jiang Ren's chin until their eyes met. His voice was calm, yet chilling enough to send shivers down anyone's spine. So, what should we do now, since we can't find him? I guess we'll just have to settle things with you instead. Does that sound good? He was smiling the entire time, yet that smile only made Jiang Ren feel even colder inside. At that moment, Jiang Ren finally began regretting his impulsive decision. But now that he'd come this far, there was no turning back. Gritting his teeth, he said, I'll bring him here today. I promise there won't be any problems this time. Only then did Lu Cheng nod with slight satisfaction. At least you're somewhat useful. His gaze suddenly shifted to Jiang Ren's face. But why is your skin so rough? It feels scratchy just looking at it. Another boy burst into laughter. Poor people obviously can't afford proper skincare. Looking rough is normal. Isn't that right, little top student? Jiang Ren lowered his head without saying a word. Every insult crushed what little pride he had left. They weren't wrong. His family really was poor. Compared to these young masters and young ladies who had been born with golden spoons in their mouths, ordinary families meant less than grains of sand in their eyes. The only reason he'd been admitted to Jinyu Academy was because of his outstanding grades. When he first enrolled, he hadn't thought much of these wealthy second-generation students. He believed that talent and hard work alone would be enough. But after arriving at Jinyu Academy, the pride he'd spent years building was shattered again and again by the cruel reality around him. At his previous school, he'd never once fallen out of the top 10 in the rankings. But after coming here, he had actually been pushed beyond the top 100. He refused to believe it at first, convincing himself that he simply hadn't performed well enough. Yet no matter how hard he worked, all he received in return was one crushing setback after another. Reality proved that he simply couldn't surpass the students ahead of him. It turned out that not only was there an insurmountable gap in family background, but even the academic talent he had always been most proud of was nothing more than an impossible mountain to climb. Why was fate so unfair? Why did those people get both wealthy families and brilliant minds? Thankfully, there had always been someone like Yi Huichuan, a fool with a terrible temper who was incredibly easy to manipulate. Because of his bad personality, hardly anyone in class wanted to be friends with him, so Jiang Ren only had to play a few small tricks before easily becoming his friend. Later, after learning that Yi Huichuan came from a poor family, Jiang Ren deliberately paid for their meals every time they ate together. What an idiot! But that foolishness also comforted Jiang Ren. At least not every rich kid was outstanding. However, Su Nianchu's appearance completely shattered that illusion. Why did someone as stupid as Yi Huichuan get to know Su Nianchu? Why were they even so close? The moment Jiang Ren heard Su Nianchu say, "We've known each other for a long time," he had been so consumed by jealousy that he wanted nothing more than to rush over and strangle Yi Huichuan on the spot. He absolutely couldn't allow something like that to continue. So when he heard someone wanted to teach Yi Huichuan a lesson, he was secretly overjoyed. He wished those people would drive Yi Huichuan away forever so he'd never be able to get close to Su Nianchu again. Qin Gong, who had just walked into the room, lightly patted Jiang Ren on the cheek. Looking down at him from above, he smiled faintly and said, "All right, help him up. Don't bully our model student." Meanwhile, I wandered over to Class 1 to look for someone. Since Jiang Ren and I were going out for dessert that afternoon, I wouldn't be going home with Su Nianchu after school. I hadn't planned on coming over personally, but Su Nianchu hadn't replied to any of my messages, so just to be safe, I decided to make the trip myself. The students in Class 1 recognized me immediately. Before I could even say anything, one of them enthusiastically called out, "Su Nianchu, someone's here for you." Hearing his name, Su Nyanchu looked over. The girl, who had been sitting perfectly upright reading, immediately closed her book and walked toward me the moment she saw my smiling face. "You students are really helpful. Thanks." I reached into my pocket, took out a few candies, and handed them to the boy who had called her over. The boy laughed awkwardly and quickly waved his hands. "You're too polite. Honestly, we should be thanking you. You always bring us something interesting to watch." Students these days are surprisingly friendly with me, I thought. That's pretty rare. Before long, Su Nyanchu stopped in front of me. As always, she lowered her head slightly. Her hands were nervously clasped together, but compared to before, there was now a trace of anticipation hidden in her heart. Taking a bite out of the tip of a strawberry, I lazily leaned against the wall and said, "You'll have to go home by yourself this afternoon." My youthful, relaxed voice drifted into her ears like cool silk. Yet by the time those words reached Su Nyanchu, they felt as though they had been wrapped in freezing air, as cold as a block of ice taken straight from a freezer, steaming faintly under the blazing summer sun. The light in Su Nyanchu's eyes disappeared almost instantly. An indescribable bitterness spread through her chest until it became difficult to breathe. As expected, only a few days had passed and she'd already been pushed away again. The tiny spark of hope she'd finally managed to gather was completely extinguished, leaving behind nothing but ashes that mocked her own foolishness. It was always like this. Every time I treated her a little better, she couldn't help but want to get closer to me. But the moment I became cold again, she was immediately thrown back to where she'd started, mercilessly pushed away until she was bruised all over again. She had long since gotten used to it. She desperately tried to suppress her emotions. So why did her heart still hurt this much? It had already been a long time since she'd heard me call her little sister. The last time she'd heard me scold Chen Rang, she'd even thought she was dreaming. She wondered if I'd finally seen through Chen Rang's true nature, so she had cautiously tried calling me brother again. But what left her stunned was that instead of looking at her with disgust like before, I patiently explained everything to her. This morning, I'd even allowed her to ride in my car. Yet she still vividly remembered what had happened several years ago when I'd coldly ordered her to get out of the car. She'd injured her ankle that day, and after Father severely scolded me, I'd ended up disliking her even more. Back then, I'd laid down 3 iron rules at school. She wasn't allowed to appear in front of me whenever she wanted, we weren't allowed to make eye contact in the hallways, and under no circumstances could anyone learn about our relationship. Su Nyanchu had silently obeyed those rules all this time, because only by doing so could she avoid suffering even more once they returned home, and my mood turned bad. Lately, however, every unusual thing I'd done had been like throwing stones into a calm lake. She couldn't tell whether the ripples they created were signs of warmth, or the beginning of a whirlpool that would eventually swallow her whole. Maybe he's only treating me well so he can destroy me later, she thought. The higher he lifts me, the harder I'll fall. Of course, I had absolutely no idea what Su Nyanchu was thinking. Seeing her stand there without responding for such a long time, I impatiently reached over and lightly shook her arm. "Did you hear me? A classmate invited me out for dessert this afternoon. Just go home by yourself. Don't wait for me." The storm raging inside Su Nyanchu's heart stopped in an instant. She suddenly looked up, her pupils widening dramatically as though someone had shone a bright light directly into her eyes. So, he's only going out for dessert. Looking at her now, she really seemed strange. Her face had become so pale it looked like a sheet of paper. Thinking she might be sick, I reached out and placed my hand against her forehead. The moment my fingers touched her skin, Su Nyanchu's entire body trembled and even her breathing stopped for an instant. "You don't have a fever. Could your stomach hurt instead?" I withdrew my hand and looked at her with a hint of complaint. "Why didn't you reply to my messages? You made me come all the way here." "My phone," Su Nyanchu whispered so softly it was almost impossible to hear. "It got confiscated." Hidden beneath her sleeves, her palms were already soaked with sweat. At the very moment I pulled my hand away, she almost reached out instinctively to hold on to it. "Your phone got confiscated?" My eyes widened in disbelief. Where did this model student come from? She's way too honest. Nothing like me. I had brought 3 phones to school and not a single one had been confiscated. They were all backup plans. As long as I had enough spare phones, there was no need to worry about teachers taking them away. Then again, she was the top student in the entire grade. The world of academic geniuses was beyond the understanding of ordinary people, especially someone who was a chemistry prodigy. I'd secretly looked at Su Nyanchu's chemistry score before. 100 out of 100. How is that even possible? How could anyone actually score full marks in chemistry? Carefully watching my expression, Su Nyanchu spoke in an almost inaudible voice. Next time, I won't let it get confiscated. No, don't, I laughed helplessly. I'll just assume I accidentally wandered into a battle between immortals. As I spoke, I casually handed her the box of strawberries I'd been carrying. There were still a few fresh, bright red strawberries left inside, each one looking especially juicy and delicious. After all, she's my little sister. That's all for today's video. If you find this video entertaining, I will upload second part of it. Please like the video, the like target is 50 likes, and write in comments if there is something I should improve.